Donald Yecke was a Wisconsin boy, born and raised in Sheboygan, a medium-sized town on the banks of Lake Michigan. He had a typical childhood for young men of his generation. He was an enthusiastic baseball player. He was a doting older brother to his youngest brother, Dennis, 8 years younger, and extremely close to his middle sister, Gladys. It was a typical American childhood, interrupted, as so many American childhoods were at that moment, by the twin calamities of the Great Depression and a Second World War. Like a lot of young men who came of age at that moment, Donald Yecke never finished high school. At his father's suggestion, he left after the 10th grade and took a job working at City Bakery in Sheboygan to bring in a little extra money to help support the family. He shared a dream with a cousin of one day sailing around the world, and so he opted for the Navy instead of the Army. Now, on board a destroyer, the baker is a good man to know. And the Emmons was a lot luckier than most because their baker was a pro, the envy of all the other ships that they sailed with. Years later, Donald's youngest brother, Dennis, would go to ship reunions, and men would recognize his name and come up to him and say, "Your brother made cinnamon rolls that were lighter than air." And I found myself thinking a lot about how a simple treat like that might have helped blunt a little bit of the misery and the tedium of thousands and thousands of miles traversing the ocean. Donald's last visit home was Thanksgiving in November of 1944. He would return to his ship after the holiday. He and his sister Gladys made it a habit never to say goodbye. They would always say, "I'll see you later." And so those were the last words that he spoke to his sister and to his family when he left. The Emmons sailed first here to Hawaii for exercises, and then on to Okinawa to support the invasion. Together with another minesweeper, the USS Rodman, the Emmons was sweeping for mines 5 days after the beginnings of the landings, when the two ships were caught in a massive wave of Japanese kamikaze pilots. Donald assisted one of the gun crews, and they knocked many of the attackers out of the sky. But eventually the Emmons' ammunition ran out. The Emmons suffered nearly 140 casualties and 60 killed. Donald Yecke was one of them. He was buried at sea on April 6th, and the U.S. Navy would scuttle the Emmons the following day on April 7th. But his influence on his family didn't end with his death. Don Gruby, another serviceman, a Sheboygan native, had been aboard another vessel that pulled some of the bodies from the Emmons after the explosion. And Don Gruby thought that Donald Yecke looked a little familiar. When Gruby's mother sent him a clipping from the local obituary, he recognized the face, and suddenly it clicked. Donald Yecke had sold him bread at the Sheboygan bakery. So when the war ended, Don Gruby went to Sheboygan to tell the family in person that he had touched their son, that he had held there and been there at his death. And he talked to Gladys, and the two of them started dating. Just 2 years later, the two were married. As I looked back on a promising life cut short, I thought of three things that I think summarize much of Donald Yecke's life: duty, service, sacrifice. Donald, I thank you for leading your life in such an exemplary fashion.